Gambling can be a bit of fun. Better made a drink over a game of pool, put a bit of money on the state of origin, make a wild multi that has no chance of actually winning. I have no problem with gambling morally. Personally, I just don't like losing money. I'll put a little bit of money on something here or there, but it's rare. But for roughly 105,000 Australian men, it's not fun or rare anymore. Aussies excel when it comes to gambling. Despite having less than 1% of the world's population, we have around 18% of the world's pokies. The vast majority of the world's pokies are in casinos, but out of those that aren't in casinos, 76% of them are right here in Australia. Young men, and I do mean young men, are increasing their gambling, and we lose about $31.5 billion per year. We know there's a link between gambling, domestic violence, suicide, and obviously financial difficulties. Gambling has infected this nation, and it should be a priority for politicians to protect us and future generations from dealing with the harms of gambling. But what happens when going against the status quo isn't a gamble that a politician wants to take? It turns out we all suffer, and those who try and protect us become a target. Lobbying, in its simplest terms, is the action of someone, a lobbyist, attempting to use their connections with an influential figure to try and advocate for a particular group or organization. If it sounds a bit seedy, that's because it can be. I don't think lobbying is inherently wrong. When you think of lobbying, you go to the classics: mining, alcohol, and gambling. But there are also the community groups who will lobby politicians to try and make Australia a bit better. Lobbyists at their core are professionals trying to influence the government to write policy or alter Australia in a particular way. Sometimes it's for selfish financial reasons, but other times it's to help those who need it. There are a bunch of rules when it comes to lobbying. There's attempts to make it more transparent and honest. Now, we can sidestep a lot of those boring conversations about the rules, though, because a lot of the time, lobbyists find a way to do that. There are so many potential loopholes, and it really does feel like a vibe check a certain amount of the time. You might think I am being overly simplistic or fear-mongering, but let's just look at the numbers. There are 727 registered lobbyists in the Australian Parliament, but there are over 2,000 individuals who hold orange lobbyist passes. That gets them the same access to the people and the building. The reason this can happen is because we've divided lobbyists into two categories: your in-house lobbyists and your third-party lobbyists. Those third-party lobbyists are the ones who have to be registered because they work for third-party organizations, and they can represent various clients, and we've decided, reasonably so, it's important to know who those clients are. Most of the time. But in-house lobbyists, they don't have to officially register the same way. They're not third-party professional lobbyists acting on behalf of someone, no. They're simply lobbying on behalf of their known employer. It's obvious where their intent lies. Why do we care about registering them and holding them to the same level of scrutiny? This isn't a seedy third-party lobbyist who's a professional at what they do, and whose client's interests might be more vague than what the Australian public is comfortable with. This is an expert in-house lobbyist working for a major and powerful and rich Australian corporation who simply wants to advocate for their interests and all related subsidiaries and investments. Don't get me wrong, there is a meaningful difference between someone using a third-party organization and us not being entirely aware of who the clients even are, versus someone who is proudly walking into Parliament with the BP logo stamped on their forehead. It's probably still good to register both, though, so they're under the same level of scrutiny. Given all of this, you can understand why independent MPs like Helen Haines or David Pocock are so passionate about getting more transparency in the Parliament. And more recently, when Pocock became too outspoken about this, he became a target. As a way to build camaraderie, there are unofficial clubs within the Parliament that give MPs an opportunity to mingle with one another and get to know people across the aisle. One of which is the Parliament Sports Club, and it unfortunately came under fire when it was revealed that Responsible Wagering Australia had become a sponsor of the club. For those unaware, Responsible Wagering Australia is responsible for managing some of the biggest gambling organizations in the country: Sportsbet, Bet365, PointsBet, and Betfair. For a mere $2,500, Responsible Wagering Australia now had access to key opinion leaders and over 200 parliamentary members. I would definitely say that is worth the gamble. For reference, in 2021 to 2022, Responsible Wagering Australia's clients had a taxable revenue of $1.8 billion. For $2,500, what an investment. It's a perfect encapsulation of how we view sports here in Australia, that even the casual parliament sports club cannot be disentangled from gambling. Andy Turnbull, the club CEO, put all of our fears to rest by giving us a few reassuring statements as to why we don't have to worry about lobbying at these types of events. One, because there's an unspoken rule that you don't talk about business. And two, in his experience, the bigger the organization, the less likely they are to do stuff that's against the rules and misuse the club. Do you feel better? Because I actually feel worse. The reassurance he gave me was a genuine bona fide, trust me bro, it just doesn't happen. An insider Cracky was able to speak to said what we're all thinking. That's bullshit. It's similar to the rules of a men's club. Business still gets spoken about. We know people talk, even at these social events, or when you go out for drinks or dinner afterwards. And just speaking about the optics for a second, there is something uniquely miserable about running for Resilience, a suicide prevention organization, being at the same events and sponsoring the same team as gambling advocates, which is a suicide production industry. Days after condemnation about this sponsorship, I shit you not, it was registered as a lobbying group. Now, CEO Andy Turnbull has been a registered lobbyist since 2009, and he claimed that as he was planning to retire, it was necessary to deregister as a lobbyist himself and put it in the name of the company. It was just to ensure things ran smoothly after his retirement. He also made sure to give us more reassurance that there's nothing to be worried about with sponsorships because they'll take on all sponsors. They're agnostic. It's not their place to say what's right and wrong. I think it should be, Andy. I think it should be up to you to say no to that. Keep in mind, Anthony Albanese, the Prime Minister of the country, is actually the president of the club. So technically, Anthony Albanese was the president of a lobbying group. At least one member of the club, ex-footy member and current MP David Pocock, shared his disappointment publicly. He did this firstly to Turnbull in private before doing it for the public as well. For that, Pocock was ousted from the club and told he was not allowed to attend any fixtures in the future. Turnbull claims this happened because he offered to meet with Pocock in private, talk about ways this could be prevented in the future, and even put forward the idea of an integrity officer to make sure that these types of sponsorships don't happen. But because Pocock spoke about it in Senate estimates, that was a sign of bad faith and that his position in the club was untenable. Turnbull also argued it was strange Pocock all of a sudden had an issue with this sponsorship when Responsible Wagering Australia was actually a sponsor of the club since July 2023. And there were over 40 occasions where members of the club were made aware of the sponsorships. Penny Wong and Anthony Albanese both also took shots at Pocock, claiming that he was just trying to get his name in the headlines and sidestepping, the issue with lobbying generally, and also the fact that, again, technically Anthony Albanese is the president of a lobbying group now. After 3 other independent MPs also left the club, Albanese took the opportunity to walk the comments back. I think realizing that the way he went about trying to sidestep the issue wasn't going to be particularly effective. He also went as far as to make a comment that Pocock should be allowed back into the club. Despite all of this meaning nothing and it just being an attempt at publicity, days after all of this happened, the club was eventually deregistered as a lobbying group. Turnbull still claimed it was due to the advice he got from a higher up in the Attorney General's department, but that he'd received new advice that meant it no longer needed to be registered. Look, I'm going to be honest, I think there's a strong argument that registering the club as a lobbying group was actually more honest and transparent. But that doesn't fix the fact that it's wrong that it was even sponsored by a gambling group in the first place. This whole situation just highlights one of many ways that organizations claw their ways into the offices, pockets, and ears of our politicians. Transparency is all well and good, but watching someone rob me is probably better than being robbed blind, but I'd prefer not to be robbed at all. I think a lot of the conversation about dark money in politics in Australia is a bit overblown. We don't really have an issue with dark money because we know exactly who's paying our politicians. Mining, gambling, and liquor. What that means, though, is we have the opportunity to know exactly what systems we can put in place to stop these organizations from taking over politics in this country. I don't have an issue with gambling or liquor or mining. What I do have an issue with is my politicians being bought. And what I have even more of an issue with is when I don't know at least who's the one buying them. But hey, come join the Discord, come talk about it, come say hi, come let me know anything in the comments, like and subscribe. It's been real.